The story does not begin with a wedding. It begins with a cry that Isaac tried to bury deep enough to forget, but never could. The cry of his father kneeling beside the fresh grave of Sarah. The cry Isaac overheard through the folds of the tent wall the night she died. A cry Isaac had never heard before, not even on the mountain when Abraham lifted the knife. He had survived being laid on an altar, but losing Sarah shattered something inside him that the ram in the thicket had not repaired. The entire camp felt the weight of grief. The desert wind carried it. The stars seemed dimmer. Even the animals moved quietly, as if they knew a sacred voice had gone silent. Sarah's absence was a hole that swallowed light. Isaac withdrew from everyone. He spent his days walking alone along dry riverbeds, kicking dust with the tip of his sandal, replaying memories he didn't want but needed to feel. Her hands on his face, her laughter echoing through the tent, the warmth of her presence that had softened every harshness the world had given him. Abraham watched the sun fading, and he knew something must be done. Isaac was a promise, the vessel through which nations would rise. But a promise could break if left alone for too long. A man could, too. So one night Abraham summoned his oldest servant, the one who had been with him through deserts, battles, miracles, and heartbreak. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Swear to me you will not find a wife for my son from the Canaanites." The servant lowered his head. "Where then shall I go?" "To my homeland," Abraham whispered. "To my people. The promise cannot be mixed with what does not belong to it." He paused, looking toward Isaac's empty sleeping mat with a pain that tightened his jaw. "And God's angel will go before you." The servant bowed, but in his eyes was a weight of impossible responsibility. "How do you choose the woman destined to carry the covenant of the world?" He saddled camels, loaded gifts, packed provisions, and long before sunlight returned to the sky, he began the long journey east, toward Nazar's land, toward a destiny he could not see but trusted. Isaac did not join him. Isaac did not even ask where he was going. He simply stood alone, staring into the emptiness between himself and God. Days passed, then weeks. Isaac spoke little. The servants whispered that grief had carved him hollow. Abraham prayed every morning and every night, fear gnawing at him. He had survived every test God had ever given him. But watching his son fall into a silent despair was the hardest one of all. Meanwhile, the servant traveled under relentless heat. Dust collected in his beard. Sweat soaked his robes. His prayers rose with every step. "Lord, let your choice appear." When he finally reached the well of Nahor, the sun was sinking. Women approached with jars on their shoulders, laughter swirling through the air. But none stirred the servant's spirit, until one girl emerged from the edge of the crowd. A girl walking with a grace that seemed untouched by dust or heat. A girl whose presence made the servant's breath pause. Rebekah. She was young, perhaps Isaac's age, her long dark hair braided over her shoulder, her robe simple but clean, her eyes bright with confidence and kindness. She carried her jar with ease, unaware that history itself was waiting at her feet. The servant whispered a desperate prayer. "Let be the one who offers water to me and to my camels." Before he could lift his head, Rebekah noticed him. "Drink, my lord," she said gently, and then she ran. Not walked, ran to draw water for the camels too, her feet kicking dust, her braids swinging, her hands working with tireless generosity. She didn't know she was fulfilling a prophecy. She didn't know angels were watching. She didn't know nations were forming through a simple act of kindness. But the servant knew, and he fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. When he placed the bracelets on her wrists, Rebekah froze. She had seen well before, but not this kind. Not the kind that felt like a calling. She listened as he explained who he was, who Isaac was, what Abraham had commanded. Rebekah's heart raced, breath unsteady. She had dreamed of purpose, dreamed of something beyond her father's tent, something God-shaped, and she knew. She didn't know how she knew, but she knew. This was her moment. Her family tried to delay the servant when he asked to take her home. "Let her stay 10 days, they begged. Let her think. But Rebekah lifted her chin, eyes steady and clear. "I will go now." She didn't fear the journey. She feared missing the destiny waiting for her. The desert stretched endlessly as the caravan returned toward Canaan. Days blurred, nights chilled. Rebekah prayed with each mile, wondering what Isaac looked like, wondering if he was kind, strong, lonely, wondering if she was enough for the promise carried in his name. And then one evening, when the sky glowed in the soft colors of dying sunlight, she saw him, Isaac, sitting alone in a field, head bowed, hands clasped, shoulders heavy, not with work, but with grief. The servant slowed. Rebekah lifted her veil, breath tightening. Isaac looked up as if pulled by an invisible hand. Their eyes met. For a moment, everything went still. The grief, the questions, the silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Rebekah stepped down from a camel. "Who is that man in the field?" she whispered. The servant smiled softly. "My master." Rebekah's hands trembled as she covered her face with the veil. Isaac walked toward her, hesitant and cautious, as if afraid that hope might break if he moved too quickly. When he reached her, he stopped, searching her veiled face as though he could already see through the cloth. Rebekah lowered her head. "My lord," she whispered. Isaac couldn't speak at first. He had not smiled since Sarah died. He had not felt warmth in his chest for months. But something in Rebekah's presence, her gentleness, her courage, the quiet fire in her eyes, stirred his heart in a way nothing had since the day he buried his mother. He took her hand, and for the first time since the mountain, Isaac felt whole. He brought her into Sarah's tent, a sacred gesture, one that meant she was now the new matriarch, the new heart of the promise. And for the first time since his mother's death, Isaac allowed himself to feel comfort again. Rebekah wiped his tears that first night, and Isaac let her. The camp whispered. The promise continues. But beneath all the joy, a shadow still lingered. The desert wind spoke of something brewing in the distance, a conflict older than Isaac himself, a battle waiting in the womb of the future, because the promise was not finished. Rebekah would soon carry twins, two sons who would tear the world apart before God stitched it back together. But for now, Isaac held her hand and breathed again, and heaven whispered, "This marriage will shape nations. This love will birth destiny. This union will change the world." But destiny always comes with a cost, and the cost was already on its way.